In the headline, scholars say US sanction against Ethiopia could result in loss of an important partner in East Africa. Russia and China reassure commitments to collaborate with Africa. Hello and welcome to this news hour. I'm Daniel Kasahun with the news. New measures by USA against Ethiopia will seriously damage long-standing and bilateral relations between the two nations. The Minister of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Dina Mufti gave the ministry's weekly press briefing on the current diplomatic engagements. In his briefing, Dina focused on the visa restrictions on Ethiopian officials by the United States. The spokesperson stated that the visa restrictions and other related measures taken by the United States government will seriously undermine the long-standing and important bilateral relationship between the two countries, which dates back to 120 years. According to Dina, the United States administration to impose visa restrictions and other measures will also affect the constructive spirit of engagement between the two nations.
This week there were about 3 statements that we have come out with. One was on the recent American measure by of restricting visa on Ethiopian officials. In that case, the statement clearly expresses the fact that the measure taken is not a reflection of the historic relations existing between the two countries. Ethiopia and the US have had 120 years of diplomatic relations. They have had close cooperations in fighting terrorism and working toward this regional peace and stability. And in this statement, it was clearly made clear in the official that Ethiopia does not accept and does not consider this as a statement that measures up to the level of the relationship between the two countries. Otherwise, citizens abroad have been carrying out various activities, of which the Defend Ethiopia Task Force in Europe can be mentioned. They have been carrying out protests, virtual protests, and they have been resisting what others have been doing against Ethiopia. And the slogan is "Hands off Ethiopia."
The latest restriction against Ethiopia by the United States government is drawing criticism from countless Ethiopians. Almayo Arda is an economist who strongly criticizes the U.S. decision to impose visa restriction on Ethiopian officials. In a telephone conversation with ETV English, he called upon Ethiopians to stay united and tackle foreign intervention.
It seems so. It seems that America is acting on behalf of the TPLF. First of all, America's justification, the justification America put out to justify the current sanction, which comes as aid cut and visa restriction, is a bogus one. You see, they claim that there is a deliberate mass starvation in Tigray. They also claim that there is genocide. They also claim that there is ethnic cleansing. But they have never tried to bring any evidence against this. They haven't even heard evidence or information supplied out by World Food Program, Medicine Sans Frontier. These are organizations who know the truth on the ground. They just simply acted out of sheer hatred for Ethiopia. And it seems that they are trying to push Ethiopia's sovereignty, to invade Ethiopia's sovereignty on behalf of the TPLF. That's what I feel. mind you, there will always be some kind of effect because of the aid cut. But as proclamation placed it out, they are not going to cut probably the humanitarian assistance, but they may cut the security assistance. And fortunately, Ethiopia is not very much interested in buying weapons from America, and now it is buying from Russia. The rest, you see, the financial side of the sanction, which could bring in the IMF and the World Bank, probably may affect the borrowing capacity of Ethiopia. Unfortunately, the world is not only American. There are other countries who will be ready to lend you some money. Anyway, there is some effect, but it cannot be whatever danger, whatever risk that comes out of this sanction, it is not greater than protecting our sovereignty. It's not at all. We have to be very clear about it.
A British writer and analyst of politics and international relations, Tom Fowdy, says the current U.S. restriction of Ethiopian officials indicates the interest of scrambling Africa. In an article featured on Russia Today, he said the restriction could backfire and push Ethiopia closer to Beijing. Aula Teklemariam has looked into the article. Take a look.
The recent U.S. visa restriction planned to be imposed over Ethiopian officials has become frontline news of the latest media reporters. In an article featured on the Russia Today, a British writer and analyst of politics and international relations, Tom Fowdy, said the restriction implies plan to scramble Africa. According to the report, Washington has long viewed Ethiopia as a crucial partner in a key region. But the new sanction it has just imposed on the Addis Ababa government could backfire and push it closer to Beijing. It has been a weekend of extraordinary developments in Washington's relationship with Ethiopia, which have also been a contradictory nature. On Saturday, the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation secured a contract with a consortium of companies to fund the country's 5G network on the condition of the money isn't used on Chinese telecoms giant Huawei and ZTE. Then the very next day, the State Department imposed sweeping sanctions over Ethiopia's government and army, as well as cutting international aid over what it deems a human rights abuse in the Tigray region, where Addis said it has been fighting a conflict with a rebel regional government. Bloomberg reports that these sanctions may broaden to include blocking IMF and World Bank lending to the country. The sanctions represent a potential turning point in U.S.-Ethiopian relations, which have soared since the bloody Tigray conflict erupted last November. Washington has long viewed Ethiopia as a critical partner in East Africa, fearing that any destabilization in the region could help Islamic militant groups such as Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab stoke ethnic tensions and threaten freedom of movement in the Red Sea. How can one make sense of Washington's contradictory moves toward the country? Asked the report. President Biden has obviously been under some pressure from Congress to act on the conflict in Tigray. However, the situation is neatly illustrated by one word: China. The U.S. wants to make inroads into Africa to thwart and compete with Beijing's cozy relationship with many countries on that continent. Washington sees its foreign policy through the lens of this rivalry. When U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with leaders of Nigeria and Kenya recently, he warned African nations to be wary of Beijing, to try to assert strategic dominance. Washington is turning to its classic modus operandi of simultaneously using sanctions as a leverage in order to influence Ethiopia's foreign policy, while using debt as a means to procure political moves in its favor and to strengthen the private sector, particularly against Beijing. The DFC, America's development bank, is one to watch. Established in 2019, it is an arm of the U.S. government created to try to rival China's Belt and Road Initiative in investing in developing countries. However, it has a more explicit potential an ideological angle to it than Beijing's program, in that it demands compliance with an American strategic preferences in exchange for low-interest loans and forced privatizations to the benefit of U.S. firms.
Similarly, Lawrence Freeman, a renowned scholar and political economic analyst for African states, said that restrictions by the United States on Ethiopia will not only reverse decades of cooperation between the two nations, but potentially could endanger the entire Horn of Africa and beyond. Kasan Chane has looked into the article. Take a look.
The State Department press a statement that the Biden administration has imposed wide-ranging restrictions on economic and security assistance to Ethiopia and will bring their defense trade control policy in line with them. Lawrence Freeman, political economic analyst for Africa, underscored. Accordingly, he said that although not explicitly stated by Blinken, the United States will suspend $130 million of United States security assistance to Ethiopia that originally posed by the Trump administration. Freeman noted that multiple government sources report that the Biden administration is in the process of taking additional punitive measures against Ethiopia, including pressuring the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank to hold back funds already designated for programs in Ethiopia. Additional United States sanctions have not been ruled out. The political economic analyst for Africa, Lawrence Freeman, says the report with the announcement of this bilateral and possible multilateral assaults against Ethiopia will not only reverse decades of cooperation between the two nations, but potentially could endanger the entire Horn of Africa and beyond. The statement further depicts that Ethiopia has played an indispensable role in providing security and stability in East Africa. This new United States posture towards Ethiopia meant to appease the international labor establishment and is reckless and perilous. These types of measures, usually reversed for enemies of the United States, are being implemented against a long-time trusted ally, he said. He accentuated that a nation that has vigorously collaborated with the United States under both Republican and Democratic presidents in fighting terrorism and violent extremism in the region has of a very great importance. Expressing the gravity of this abrupt policy shift by President Biden, Cameron Hodgson of the Atlantic Council said to foreign policy, "This is a major strategic shift in the Horn of Africa to go from an anchor state for United States interests to become a potential adversary to United States interests." He said this foolishness and lack of judgment by President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, and the United States Congress can potentially lead to a calamity for Africa, not seen since the disastrous decision by the Obama administration to overthrow the Libyan government in October 2011. According to nations in the Sahel and millions of Africans living in that region are still suffering today from the misadventure by President Obama and his zealot regime change advisors who removed President Gaddafi from office. He also cited looking at Libya today and the effects almost a decade later on North Africa, noting attempts to weaken Ethiopia through economic strangulation and political resolution. This turbulent period of Ethiopian society are downright dangerous and could cause severe harm for millions of Africans, he mentioned. This draconian assault against Ethiopia by the United States can potentially lead to a weakening of the Ethiopian nation by encouraging more regional nationalist attacks on the government, according to Lawrence Freeman, political economic analyst for Africa.
In a related story on the U.S. decision to impose visa restrictions on Ethiopian officials, in addition to its previous decision to restrict economic and security assistance to Ethiopia, Ethiopian youths expressed their dismay. As a sovereign nation, Ethiopia has the potential to resolve any internal issues by its own, they said, adding that US and other Western powers should not intervene in the country's internal affairs. Jerusalem Bezaha has compiled their views as follows.
As an Ethiopian, as a woman, as a feminist, as a young person, I am very disappointed in those involvements that the United States is making to dominate and manipulate our political system or our economic system in the country. We are a sovereign country. We are independent. We don't need someone else to come and meddle in. We can fix what is causing us problem in our country. We can fix it. We can fix it together. I don't like how they are trying to politicize everything into their own benefit. I wish they could help us genuinely from a genuine side, but they are trying to politicize everything so that they can take advantage of our separation, our disturbance, and our instability. So I very much strongly disagree with what the United States is doing to my country. We are strong as Ethiopians. We didn't need Americans. We didn't need the Western people to come and create this solution for us. We are enough.
The sanctions that was imposed by the American government, I think that's unconsiderate and sorry for the word that I'm using, ridiculous for that matter. As we know, one sovereign country can exercise any rule of law in the country and good governance. What is possible for the government to exercise any restrictions on the sovereign country. So in that in mind, if history has taught us anything, that our forefathers that we should stick together and defend our sovereign country.
Until today, Ethiopians have been solving their own problems internally. So today, we don't even need any external forces to enter in our internal problems. So as a sovereign country, what America did is not right. So I believe America will be aware of this and will learn from her mistake, and Ethiopian sovereignty will always remain the same.
They are trying to provide, visa restrictions. Is something that's very unfortunate from a country which has a long, business relationship and investment relationship with Ethiopia. So I really hope that they will, cancel the decisions that they made. And instead, I would suggest, or I would really advise the United States of America to provide, positive and, peaceful kind of solutions instead of providing restriction, because the restriction doesn't really make doesn't make any solutions or doesn't bring anything other than negative consequences.
We should understand whatever happening in our country, that shouldn't be considered as something that could seize us from existing as a country. To continue as a country is something different, something that is in other boundary. But problems might occur, economic, political, many religious problems might occur in a country. Different pressures might occur from other powerful countries and so on. That is something that could be dealt politically and in different terms. But that shouldn't be considered as something that is a threat to exist as a country. We have been a country so long, we are and we will be.
Politicians say Ethiopians must learn from Cuba how to curb the arm-twisting tactic the United States is playing against Ethiopia. The current concern of U.S. on Ethiopia has nothing to do with human rights or democracy. Stayo Tamrat reports.
Following the recent statement of the U.S. Senate on Ethiopia, Ethiopians and their friends are reacting to the statement. Some seasoned politicians of Ethiopia have also reflected on the statement, dubbing it unfair and irrational. Pressure is partly because of the 30-year-long well-established global network of the TPLF people. It is this group that has been aggressively working to exaggerate facts on the ground and propagating crafted facts about the situation in Ethiopia.
In the course of almost 3 decades in power, the TPLF have built some support, among individuals and groups in the Western countries. And now that these groups, these individuals, have been very active in maligning our government and to propagate TPLF's position on the issue. These issues were taken out of context, they were exaggerated.
demotivates Ethiopians to properly deal with U.S. armistice tactics against their country by taking lessons from Cuba.
Ethiopians, I think, must realize this, close ranks, and be strong internally. If we are united, if we are strong, we can resist these pressures. The best example is Cuba. Cuba, for, in fact, more than 60 years, managed to live 90 miles from the United States with all sorts of pressures, with all sorts of sanctions, and survived because it was internally stable, it was internally strong, internally united. So that's the only way we can, I think, resist these pressures.
The current concern of the U.S. with Ethiopia has nothing to do with human rights and democracy. The U.S. is rather scared of Ethiopia's current position to detach itself from being subservient government.
They are willing to stand with nations that has nothing to do with the standard of democracy and human rights they profess in their country. And so we know their interest in Ethiopia has nothing to do with defending human rights or democracy or justice. Their problem with Ethiopia now is Ethiopia is in a trajectory line, political line, that would probably liberate it from being an appendage to the West.
But the past 27 years was the regime of servant government to the West, they said.
In the past 27 years, the regime in Ethiopia has been so subservient to Western regimes, especially the US and the UK, and at the cost of Ethiopia losing its international status.
The government of Ethiopia shall mobilize the diaspora to join hands as usual in voicing Ethiopians and their government's concern and their sovereignty to the global community.
Hi, my name is Brooke Thomas Hafterwind. I was born and raised in the UK. I do not like what the Egyptians are doing to Ethiopia. This is my dam.
It's my dam.
It's my dam. It's my dam. It's my dam.
It is my dam.
It is my dam. It's my dam.
Welcome back. You're watching at this news hour. Filling, timing, and operations of dams can catalyze most of the conflicts associated to a dam's lifetime, which can be mitigated by adaptive solutions that respond to medium to long-term hydroclimatic fluctuations. An article featured on Research Square states that the decades of sustainable dam planning efforts have focused on containing dam impacts in region conditions when the dam is fully filled and operational, overlooking potential disputes raised by the filling phase. Hence, it has argued that filling, timing, and operations can catalyze most of the conflicts associated to dam's lifetime, which can be mitigated by adaptive solutions that respond to medium to long-term hydroclimatic fluctuations. As retrospective analysis of the contested recent filling of Gibe Surd in the Omo Turkana Basin provides quantitative evidence of the benefits generated by adaptive filling strategies attaining levels of hydropower production comparable with the historical ones while curtailing the negative impacts to downstream users. Ethiopia is set to conduct the second filling of its Grand Renaissance Dam this rainy season. watching the live transmission of Addis News Hour. In his message on the occasion of the African Day 2021, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has highlighted challenges in nations' path to prosperity. The road to a new, prosperous nation is bound to have its own rough patches, the Premier underlined. The Premier has recalled the great achievements of athlete Abeba Bikila, the first Black African Olympic gold medalist, paraphrasing, even the smoothest of roads will give blisters to the barefoot. What matters is the clarity of vision and barefooted determination to stay on the course. Africa Day 2021 is being celebrated across the world, commemorating the founding of the Organization of African Unity on May 25, 1963. Africa Day 2021 is celebrated across the world, commemorating the founding of the Organization of African Unity and different initiatives here in Ethiopia and in the African region that has been working on youth and women have celebrated the day with various assortments. Participants of the event urged the youth to remember the sacrifices of African ancestors for today's Africa through protecting African unity.
The sacrifice made by our forefathers, even to come together for them to fight the colonial master, it is something extraordinary that is done by them in their time. They bring us a unity that most of it we need to do all the parts. So for me, our forefathers, they did the best. They did the role. But what is our role now? Because they paved the way, they show us this is the direction that we need to follow. But if we sleep, we will lose the direction. So we always remember them with a great role they played. But to make them happy wherever they are, we need to go ahead with the journey that they started. So our focus is how can we continue the unity that they project for Africa?
Africans, especially Ethiopians' role towards constructing or founding the Organization of African Union, lately the African Union, and also other continental issues is remarkable when you come to the role of Ethiopia. But this shouldn't be found only on the history book of high school and preparatory students. This should be repeated again. We Ethiopians should make an history, and we do have an opportunity to do that at this current time. For this, the role of the youth is remarkable, and it is wide. So I'm proud of to be African, to be Ethiopian. So we use this in Ethiopia, also in Africa as well. Should use the history not only to tell and to get an admiration or something else, but to use it as an energy to live more than that. So we can.
And Africa is the first continent who has a young age, like at the age of 15 or 16 age groups. So these young age groups they have a lot of energy for the coming 15 years. So if you're using those resources properly and wisely, and to participate in politics and to participate in economical aspect and different aspects. So if we even those African youth, we have to product, and we see the Africa we want. So
the event also highlighted that Ethiopia has given priority to the younger generation and women in all aspects.
Africa is richly endowed with vast human and natural resources, which is harnessed in accordance with our vision. Agenda 63 will improve the livelihoods of the people of Africa through the rapid eradication of hunger, poverty, and disease. Now, Ethiopia has the 10 years development plan. It says Ethiopia's prosperity and making Ethiopia a beacon of African prosperity.
The Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, also stated that the young generation should be pioneers to achieve Agenda 2063 and the 2030 goals of Sustainable Development Goals.
According to Agenda 2063 and even the Global Sustainable Development Goals, is is it expects a lot, and there's a lot of expectations of current political leaders to advance to advance and empower the youth. So I think Africa has to use the youth both to leap itself into the 21st or 21st century and anchor its development. Without the youth, I think we are going nowhere.
In business, a consortium led by Vodacom affiliate Safaricom has won a license to operate a mobile network in Ethiopia. It's the first such award to a private group as the country looks to open up its telecoms industry to competition. The consortium includes Vodacom Group, Vodafone Group, Sumitomo Corporation, and CDC Group. The $850 million deal is set to create up to 1.5 million new jobs and brings $8.5 billion in investment over 10 years. It's also expected to provide 4G and 5G internet services in the country, and by 2023, a low orbit satellite will be put in place to provide nationwide 4G coverage. Talking to CGTN about the new deal, Damadin Ngatu, global chairman of the Fairfax Africa, said the new move will have multifaceted advantage to the country's overall economic progress.
There is going to be a new player in the marketplace, in a monopoly that has been in place for 126 years. So that by itself is a dramatic transformation for the market, not just, as you indicated, for the telecom sector, but for many other sectors, from manufacturing to agro, and most importantly for the financial service sector, which needs a robust, reliable, strong telecom infrastructure. So the introduction of, as you've said, the Safaricom consortium, I think will increase not only competition, but enhance the services to customers, both corporate customers and domestic customers. The government has put out 2 licenses, but as you know, on Saturday, the Council of Ministers awarded only one, which is the Safaricom consortium, but they're retendering the second license very shortly, as they said. So you're going to be seeing 3 big competitors in a market which didn't know what competition was. And that's a huge transformational impact on the Ethiopian economy. As I said, beyond telecom, but also the nascent technology ICT sector in Ethiopia will get a big boost.
Zamadena pronounced the deal an important step forward for Ethiopia to attract more foreign investment as their trusts will grow substantially.
It's interesting. In just 1 week of launching its own mobile money services, Ethio Telecom announced that it signed up 1 million subscribers to the services. So their expectation is by this time next year, they would have built enough capacity to be able to compete with, essentially the inventor, the innovator of mobile money, which is Safaricom through its M-Pesa. So I think they'll be ready. And as I said, it's good for the consumer when you have diversified service providers in a country that, as I said, for 126 years, there was a state monopoly. That, I think, by itself is transformational, but the service capacity that these international companies like Safaricom will bring will also boost the confidence of the consumer, the confidence of corporate customers to use Ethiopia as their base for ICT innovation, to use Ethiopia for financial services innovation, and many other things. And these companies that are investing, I think, will help build that capacity domestically and hopefully attract both domestic and international investors to Ethiopia.
Wageni mwakaribishwa, Kenya yetu hakuna matata.
Longolongo nyingi. Yahaya unaishi wapi?
The name again. Mawenzi. Mawenzi.
Maskani yako Kinondoni, nyumba namba haijulikani. Yahaya Yahaya unaishi wapi? Kwani jina lako?
And finally, Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent congratulatory message to heads of African states and governments, noting that African countries have reached significant success in economy and social sphere. He made the remark on the occasion of Africa Day. In his congratulatory message sent to heads of African states and governments, he particularly underlined that constructive and multilateral cooperation is expanded, while mutually beneficial integration processes have advanced in the framework of the African Union and several sub-regional organizations. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has also highlighted the cooperation with African countries while attending a celebration event in Beijing as Tuesday marked the 58th African Day. Africa Day, formerly known as the African Freedom Day, commemorates the founding of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. Addressing diplomats from African countries, Wang Yi said the event is a festival that China and Africa should jointly celebrate.
各位好朋友，加强同非洲国家的团结合作。
Strengthening cooperation with African countries will always be China's diplomatic priority. Both sides support each other on issues of core interests, from the fight for national independence to upholding national dignity. China wants to push bilateral cooperation to one of higher quality, such as in areas of climate change, digital economy, and human resources. China is looking forward to the China-Africa Cooperation Forum, which will be held at the end of the year.
And a quick reminder of the headlines. Scholars say US sanction against Ethiopia could result in loss of an important partner in East Africa. And Russia and China reassure commitments to collaborate with Africa. That's all for this edition. Thank you for watching. Goodbye and stay safe.